Today we're walking through every major NBA award and if they even matter. Welcome back to Life in the Stands. We have Jake and Zach on the podcast today. We're really excited to jump into every major NBA award. We're also going to talk historically to see if those awards matter at all for the team that's actually going to win the NBA title. So excited to dive into all that. We're going to go through Sixth Man of the Year, MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, Coach of the Year, all of them. So let's start, obviously, though, Bender, with the award that gets talked about the most, the award that probably means the most to everyone, and if you look back in time, the award that actually does mean the most, MVP. Who do you have winning it this year?
Yeah, we'll dig into how much it actually means in a little bit here, but I have the guy who should have won it last year, and SGA is my pick. I thought he got snubbed last year. I think he'll actually get chosen this year just out of them not wanting to pick Joker over and over and over again anyway. However, his stats do not lie regardless. I'm averaging 32, 5, and 6 with about 2 steals per game, so his impact on both sides of the floor is important for that team, and they are the number 1 seed in the West at the All-Star break. So he is my pick, and he continues to dominate.
Shea's really good. He probably should have won it last year. It feels like the MVP award lags by a year, and it's because the storyline takes that long to build. A player almost has to be snubbed for an MVP award before they're allowed to win an MVP award.
It's like the makeup award.
Yeah, I mean, like it went from Jokic to Embiid, and then I think Shea is going to do the same thing. I think it even happened with LeBron at certain times in his career. Like there were like LeBron's best years of his career were not the years he won MVP. He won MVP in like some of his best years, but like there were ones that he definitely should have. But besides the points, you have Shea Gilgeous-Alexander winning MVP for this year. Now, if you look across NBA history, there's actually been 16 teams that have won the NBA title in the same year that they have the MVP on their team. It's the most out of any major award in NBA history. Is that surprising to you?
In the same year, it shouldn't be surprising based off of what it is. I think around the same like time frame, like within like a 2 to 3 year timeline, you should still win the title. But I think the same year is pretty tough to do. Because you still need a team around you. However, the guy that usually wins the MVP is probably a top 3 seed in their conference. Now, 16 times, I thought it would maybe be a little bit more, like between 20 and 30.
Yeah.
Just because you expect them to dominate into the postseason. But that's not obviously how that works either, always. And there's actually a couple MVPs that have never won a championship at all. And it's a pretty short list, but not surprising based off of the MJ era as well. MJ and Kobe kind of kicked a lot of people out of that spot. And some of these names are Karl Malone, Charles Barkley, Steve Nash, Allen Iverson, Derrick Rose, Russ, James Harden, and newly added Joel. So a lot of big names on that list that should have won titles and did not, but at least it's a short list.
Yeah, the list is shorter than the guys who have won MVP and a title in the same year. So that's kind of crazy. Hopefully Shea doesn't get added to the second list. Hopefully he gets added to the first list.
Yep.
That'd be good for Shea. So let's move on to Defensive Player of the Year, though. You have an unfortunate pick, I would say, for Defensive Player of the Year right now.
Now, I will say it would still be deserved. I'm going to say who I'm about to pick, and I'm going to say why. Jaren Jackson Jr., he's been in the running every year, if not have won it most years. He is in like the top percentile for like block percentage and deflections per game. His deflections is about like 3 or 4 per game. So he's in like the top 90th percentile in both of those stats. Elite rim protector. However, it should have went to Wemby. But there was breaking news today that Wemby has blood clots. I believe they found one in his shoulder or something. So I hope he gets better soon. But he was averaging about 3.8 blocks per game. And he's not eligible for this award due to the new 65-game minimum rule. So it should be Wemby, but it will probably go to Jaren Jackson Jr., if not somebody else.
Yeah, unfortunately, due to that rule, like you mentioned, Wemby will probably not be in the running, but he was having an absolutely historic defensive season. So hopefully he gets better soon. Hopefully he gets back on the court at the beginning of next year, and we can see a full season of what he looks like on the defensive end, because I don't really think he was going to slow down from that pace of that many blocks a game.
But maybe they can tank for Cooper Flag now.
Maybe they can tank for Cooper Flag. And we did talk in a previous episode about the Spurs potentially having a big offseason with what's going on. So we didn't really think that was the direction, but maybe it is. Who knows? Who knows what happens there? So let's move into the sixth man of the year award here, though. This is a team we talk about being really top heavy in their starting lineup and not really having a lot of depth. So seeing you put them as the sixth man of the year should be concerning for the rest of the NBA.
Yeah, because my pick is Peyton Pritchard, who's averaging 14, 4, and 4 off the bench. Elite three-point shooter for this team, who takes enough threes for an army to begin with
Yes.
and shoots them at a high rate and high percentage. I think what you said sums it up. Top-heavy team. He's not a guy you think about even coming off their bench at all because they have a six-man rotation of basically all-stars on that team. Putting up 14 points a game in like the seventh or eighth role on that team makes this team a contender again, and they might go back-to-back.
I think the Celtics have a very good chance of going back to back. Probably just as much of a chance as any team we've seen in recent history. I mean, even going all the way back to like the Heatles and everything in the early 2010s. Celtics are really, really good.
Yeah, and you talked about being top heavy. A lot of guys that win this award are usually on a very depth-worthy team. Like, for example, like the two guys that have won the most Sixth Man of the Year awards have been Jamal Crawford and Lou Williams on teams that are contenders, but usually pretty deep teams, and they are a part of that depth. Peyton
Yep.
Pritchard, you don't think about being that depth. You think about what Derek White or Drew Holiday coming off the bench, maybe, or even Al Horford at this point, depending on what their rotation lineup looks like. No, it's Peyton Pritchard. And on top of what I just said, I don't expect anybody to win the Sixth Man of the Year award 3 times in a career ever again. I think that's unheard of.
Those guys were a different breed because they wanted to come off the bench. Like that was their really defined role in the NBA. I kind of wish that more players embraced that because it isn't like a niche that I feel like isn't really filled right now. Like who are the great six men in the NBA right now? Like I mean, like obviously Peyton Pritchard is a great option, but like you don't have those guys like you had a Lou Williams. No matter where you went, even if he was a top three player on that team, first one off the bench for sure. That's how
Exactly.
Lou will rolled. So I'll share some other kind of historical stuff after we go through the rookie of the year because the difference. I'm sorry, the most improved player because the we just did most. We did six man Peyton Pritchard. We're on the most improved player. I'm losing it. We're on the most improved player. After we go through most improved player and we go through rookie of the year, there's some things that I want to mention historically because the startling differences between MVP and those other awards. So we'll go through that a little bit. But first, Bender, let's jump into your most improved player.
Yeah, I picked Norman Powell, and it's more for the point jump. He went from 14 points a game last year in a reduced role, and an enhanced role this year is up to 24 points a game. And I was talking to other people about this earlier. His percentages stayed the same with increased volume, which is really hard to do. So he's around like 49, 50% from the field and still around 43% from three. So to increase your role and still keep the same percentages and be as efficient as you are is impressive. Now, I did think about putting other guys in this conversation like Amen Thompson, but I think that might be something he can do later on in his career, maybe next year or 2 years from now. So he deserves runner-up respect from me. But Norman Powell to be able to step into basically the Paul George role to start the year, and even when Kawhi doesn't play. So he's their second superstar, and to be able to do this at this rate is amazing.
Yeah, Norman Powell is really impressive to me. I do like the pick here just because of the amount of role increase. Like especially to start the year, there was no Kawhi and Paul George left. So you went from like the fourth or fifth guy on that team to like the number two guy on the scouting report every day. So I think it's a huge jump in the amount of attention that he's getting on a game by game basis. And like you said, to keep the efficiency. Yeah, I think Norman Powell's been one of the best stories in the NBA this year. Let's now jump to Rookie of the Year. We'll go back and talk about the Spurs a little bit.
Yeah, we're on Rookie of the Year this time.
Yeah, I'm
No,
here
but
now. I get it. All right.
yeah, he's here now. But no, I picked Stephon Castle, which he averages 13, 3, and 4, and I mentioned Peyton Pritchard, who averaged 14, 4, and 4 off the bench. Castle has come off the bench majority of the games this season, so for him to be able to have that pace as a rookie is impressive in itself, and he's only getting better with the addition of De'Aaron Fox. He had a 33-point career-high game right before the break as well, as long as he had like a couple 20-point games as well with De'Aaron Fox on the roster as well. So I don't know. He looks like he's going to be a breakout star in the next year or two. And honestly, the rookie of the year race this year outside of him has been pretty weak.
Yeah, it's been kind of disappointing. Zach Edey for a little bit, I felt like was doing well and just playing tough compared to what Stephon Casson is doing. Yeah, I mean it's kind of hard to argue that. So if you look historically, there's actually never been a rookie of the year past 1960. There was one rookie of the year in 1955 that also won the NBA title in the same year. But other than that, no rookie of the year has ever won the NBA title in the same year. There's only been 3 defensive players of the year, only one most improved player to ever win that award and the NBA title in the same years. You said it wasn't surprising that the MVP was kind of like the most matched up with who won the NBA title in the same year. Like that made more sense. History would agree with you because all of the other NBA awards, I mean, that's what they are. They're awards. They're not intended to be put on the players on the best team, right? But the data really does back up the idea that if one of your players is winning one of these awards other than MVP, your chances to win the NBA title are pretty much zero.
And you could make the argument that the MVP doesn't even matter in the regular season either, because 16 out of how many seasons is still a low percentage in itself.
Yeah. This is going back to like 1950. So what, like 75 seasons?
So that percentage is already small in itself. I don't think these awards really matter. That's why they call them regular season awards. That's why people say, I don't really care about MVP. Let's win a title. That's the hardest thing to accomplish. So guess we'll have to see if the trend continues.
Yeah, we'll have to see if the trend continues. Really interesting, though, definitely, and makes sense for MVP. But I feel like it also just kind of sidesteps so much of the conversation that happens around these awards because then people immediately go to whatever playoff performance the person that didn't win the award and was snubbed for it had. And it's like, well, wasn't the point. So, was not the point at all. Let's go to the very last one here, though. We got to touch on Coach of the Year. And this is also just kind of an interesting conversation. Coach of the Year is an interesting award. So, Jake, who do you have this year?
I have Kenny Atkinson from the Cleveland Cavaliers, and it's just because there was, yeah, I know, it's the Cavs.
All right.
But they were thinking about trading Garland or Mitchell. Even if it was just rumors, it was a thought. It's always a thought when you're struggling. But he turned the team around into 44-10 at the All-Star break. But does that really matter either? Because a lot of these coaches of the year keep getting fired within a year or two.
So that's what I would love to touch on. I'm the historical guy when it comes to NBA because I just like looking at data. But if you look back at the last couple of coaches of the year, I'm going to let the audience draw their own conclusions from this. I'm just going to list them off. So I'm just going to list off the last couple of coaches of the year. In 2024, it was Mark Daigneault from the OKC Thunder. Before that, it was Mike Brown of the Sacramento Kings, 2023. 2022 was Monty Williams of the Phoenix Suns. 2021 was Tom Thibodeau of the New York Knicks. 2020 was Nick Nurse of the Toronto Raptors. 2019 was Mike Budenholzer of the Milwaukee Bucks. 2018 was Dwayne Casey of the Toronto Raptors. Again, the Toronto Raptors had 2 coaches of the year within 3 years, and they were 2 different coaches.
Dwayne Casey got fired before he even received the award.
It feels like Coach of the Year is the participation award for whatever team makes the playoffs that nobody thought was going to that year. And then beyond that, the expectation gets reset because someone won Coach of the Year. And then when their inevitably crappy franchise doesn't make the playoffs in the next couple of years, they just fire that same coach for not living up to the expectations that were built in that one year that they got their participatory Coach of the Year trophy for bringing a team to the playoffs that never should have been there in the first place. That's kind of how Coach of the Year feels to me.
Yeah, I have nothing to say to that.
Nothing to say to that. Those, I guess, will be the parting thoughts on this week's episode of Life in the Stands. Hope everyone enjoyed us walking through all of the current predictions for the major awards this NBA season and some historical context as to whether or not these really even matter in the long run, especially for players who just want to win titles. But remember to like and subscribe. Let us know who you think is going to win each major award, if you disagree with any of these selections, and what you think about the historical context. And we will see you on the next episode.